Hello, everyone. Welcome to this video. In this session, we'll explain all the properties of the SKYVVA Outbound Soap Adapter and how each property is configured. In this diagram, we can see how a SOAP API call works between Salesforce and an external system using the SKYVVA SOAP Adapter. Salesforce acts as the sender, while the external system acts as the receiver. The important point is that this is one SOAP API call, triggered once by Salesforce. Salesforce sends one SOAP request to the external system. After processing the request, the external system returns a SOAP response if the request is processed successfully, or a SOAP fault if the request fails. Outbound flow. Salesforce sends SOAP request to external system. One SOAP API call, triggered once by Salesforce. On the left, Salesforce acts as the sender. Salesforce starts the SOAP API call and creates a SOAP request in XML format. The request is sent through the SKYVVA SOAP Adapter. The adapter transforms and prepares the request, handles communication, routing, and validation, and sends it to the external system. The external system receives the SOAP request and processes it. External SOAP systems can include any systems that expose SOAP web services, such as ERP systems, financial systems, legacy systems, and other SOAP-enabled systems. External system process request and returns response or fault. After receiving the SOAP request, the external system processes the request. There are two possible results. If the request is processed successfully, the external system returns a SOAP response to Salesforce. If the request processing fails, the external system returns a SOAP fault with error information to Salesforce. For each request, only one result is returned, either a SOAP response on success or a SOAP fault on failure. Now let's summarize the request, response, and fault flows. The request is outbound. Salesforce triggers the SOAP API call and sends a SOAP request in XML format to the external system. The response is inbound. If the request is processed successfully, the external system returns a SOAP response in XML format to Salesforce. The fault is also inbound. If request processing fails, the external system returns a SOAP fault in XML format to Salesforce. Notes. One SOAP API call is triggered by Salesforce as the sender. Salesforce sends one SOAP request to the external system. The external system processes the request. IT returns either a SOAP response on success or a SOAP fault on failure. Now, let's start the configuration. In this video, we'll focus on explaining the SOAP adapter properties. We won't cover the integration data flow because that was already explained in the previous video. Now, stand on the Adapter tab and create New Adapter. Click New button. Fill the adapter name. There are many adapter types available in SKYVVA. In this video, we'll focus on the SOAP adapter. Select the SOAP adapter to continue. Define the direction of the adapter inbound or outbound. In this video, we focus on the outbound adapter. Choose outbound. It means that needs to send data to an external system. The status field provides two options, active and inactive. Select active to enable the adapter. The first property of the SOAP adapter is the authentication type. This field defines how SKYVVA authenticates with the target SOAP API before sending or receiving data. The authentication type provides three options: Basic, Certificate, and Salesforce Authentication Provider. Select the appropriate authentication method based on the requirements of the target SOAP service. Basic type requires a username and password to authenticate. If you select Certificate as the authentication type, you must provide the certificate name and certificate password. These credentials are used to authenticate with the target SOAP service using the configured client certificate. When you select the Salesforce Authentication Provider as the authentication type, you must provide the required named credentials field. In this demo, we select the basic authentication type as an example. Then, enter the username and password provided by the external system. These credentials are used to authenticate the connection before sending any requests to the target API. As an example, we connect with the WireMock API as the target system that we are integrating with. And here is the response payload sent back to Salesforce in XML format after the request is processed successfully. The SOAP version property specifies the SOAP protocol version supported by the adapter. Currently, the SOAP adapter supports SOAP 1.1. Select this version to communicate with the target SOAP web service. Enter the API service endpoint URL provided by the WireMock service. This is the URL where the SOAP adapter sends SOAP requests and receives SOAP responses. HTTP header is specify any HTTP headers that should be included in the request. Headers provide additional metadata required by the target service, such as authentication information, content type, accepted response format, or custom header values. URL query parameter is used for enter any query parameters that need to be appended to the endpoint URL. These parameters are sent as part of the URL and are required by some SOAP services for filtering, routing, or other processing. The XML root tag and XML root tag namespace define the root element and its namespace in the SOAP request. These values must match the target SOAP service so that the request can be processed correctly. Salesforce ID handling defines how Salesforce record IDs are handled in the response. For example, you can configure the adapter to return Salesforce record IDs in the response after processing. Custom processing class. Specify an Apex class that implements custom business logic before or after the SOAP request is processed. This allows you to extend the standard behavior of the SOAP adapter. Custom authentication class. Specify an Apex authentication class if custom authentication is required. This class can generate or modify authentication headers or tokens before the request is sent. Timeout specify the maximum amount of time, in milliseconds, that the SOAP adapter waits for a response from the target service. If the timeout is exceeded, the request fails with a timeout error. SOAP action specifies the SOAP action header sent with the request. This value identifies the SOAP operation or method that the target SOAP service should execute. The next property is the pagination checkbox. Enable this option to use pagination. We won't cover it in detail here, as it is explained in a separate pagination video. If you'd like to learn more about pagination, please refer to the related video, How to Use Pagination in the SOAP Adapter. Click Save the button. Here is the adapter name that was created. Click on it. Finally, click Test Connection to verify that the adapter can successfully connect to the target system. Now the adapter test connection successful. Here is the response body payload received from the WireMock service after the request is processed successfully. In this video, we focus only on explaining the properties of a SOAP adapter. We will not demonstrate the processing flow here, as this topic has already been covered in the previous videos. In summary, the SKYVVA SOAP Adapter is used to connect Salesforce with external SOAP services. Its properties control authentication, connection details, and communication settings. Configuring these properties correctly helps ensure a reliable connection and makes the integration easier to manage and troubleshoot. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.